With over 320 lives lost and over 300 shipwrecks and accidents, Whitefish Point is called the graveyard of Lake Superior. It is also the closest point on land to the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
November 10th, 1975. A massive freighter carrying approximately 26,000 tons of iron ore on Lake Superior vanished without a single distress call. 29 men lost. No survivors, no witnesses, just gone.
For 50 years, the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald has haunted the Great Lakes. And the theories about what really happened that night, they range from credible to downright bizarre. Hey sightseers, today we're going to explore some of the theories behind one of the greatest maritime mysteries in all of American history, right here in our own backyard. The Edmund Fitzgerald was launched June 8, 1958 as the largest ship on the Great Lakes. At 729 feet long and 13,632 gross tons, she was called the pride of the American flag. For 17 years, she hauled iron ore across the Great Lakes without major incident. Captain Ernest McSorley commanded the helm on what would be her final voyage. Bound for Detroit, the Fitzgerald departed from Superior, Wisconsin in the mid-afternoon of November 9th with a full cargo of iron ore pellets, enough to make 7,500 automobiles. In the vicinity of Two Harbors, Minnesota, she joined another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson, captained by Jesse Cooper. Both ships headed east across Lake Superior toward Detroit. But a massive storm was building.
A little over 24 hours later on November 10th, near hurricane force winds were beginning to hit the region. With wind gusts between 50 to 60 miles per hour, waves swelled as high as 15 to 20 feet. At approximately 3:30 that afternoon, the Fitzgerald radioed the Anderson and reported damage.
She had a fence rail down, 2 vents lost, a list to one side. Nothing was said as to what caused the damage, but Captain McSorley indicated they were taking on water
with both pumps running. At 7:10 p.m., Captain McSorley radioed the Anderson. His last words, "We are holding our own."
Minutes later, she disappeared from radar. She sank 17 miles from Whitefish Bay in 535 feet of water. All 29 crew members perished with her. One theory that's been floated is a rare Lake Superior phenomenon called the Three Sisters. This phenomenon occurs when 3 massive rogue waves form in rapid succession, leaving little time for recovery in between. Eyewitnesses near the Fitzgerald's location reportedly observed this exact wave phenomenon on that fateful night. Furthermore, the Arthur M. Anderson suffered damage from the action of enormous waves.
The first wave crashes over the deck, flooding it with thousands of gallons of water. Before that water drains off, the second wave hits, then the third. Each wave adds more and more weight. More stress on the hull, more water forcing its way into any opening, such as the ship essentially submarines itself.
Supporters of this theory believe that this is why there was no distress call. There was simply no time to react. Remember, Captain McSorley believed they were holding their own. Then out of nowhere, the three sisters hit. Before anyone knew what was happening, the ship sank. How likely is this theory anyways? Let's take a quick review, shall we? We know from Captain McSorley's own words that the Fitz had already suffered some damage. Vents were gone, and some of the hatches may have been compromised. Had the three sisters been responsible for the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, like some experts theorize, that would have meant that as soon as those waves hit, there would have been catastrophic failure from the massive amount of water rushing in. As a result, within minutes, the ship would have lost buoyancy and started sinking. The bow would have plunged forward and the stern would have risen up, resulting in the hull fracturing apart from the stress. This theory sounds credible to me and not really all that bizarre when you take into account the fact that observers had reportedly seen that phenomenon in the area of the Fitzgerald that very night, and when you take into consideration how quickly the Fitz had disappeared from radar. Does this mean we've just solved the mystery? Hold it right there. Before we pass any more judgment, let's hear those other theories. Then there's the hatch cover theory. The 1977 Coast Guard report blamed ineffective hatch cover closures. The theory? Waves gradually flooded the cargo hold throughout the day because hatch covers failed to seal properly. But here's where this theory gets controversial.
When divers examined the wreck in 1994 using underwater drones, most hatch clamps were in good condition. Only a few were damaged. The Coast Guard suggested those damaged clamps were the ones fastened at the end. In other words, meaning they were the weakest.
Interestingly enough, the National Transportation Safety Board disagreed with the Coast Guard. The NTSB concluded the ship sank suddenly due to the collapse of one or more hatch covers under the weight of giant waves, not from gradual flooding throughout the day. More like sudden catastrophic failure. So who's right, the Coast Guard or the NTSB? Recent underwater drone footage from 2024 shows some missing hatch seals along with torn away vents. Computer simulations indicate or show water entering at thousands of gallons per minute. Just so we're clear, we're not talking about negligence on behalf of the crew. No, this evidence suggests that water was being taken on at a rate faster than anybody on board even realized. Additionally, the weight of all that water would have caused significant damage. Once one of the hatches would have collapsed under that weight, flooding would have accelerated significantly. The ship was doomed. Theory 3. Structural damage and shoaling. The Fitzgerald had undergone structural modifications that may have weakened her hull. She had been lengthened and reinforcements added. Some experts believe that these changes created stress points that ultimately led to her demise. Additionally, during the storm, Captain McSorley reported passing over the 6-fathom shoal. This is a relatively shallow underwater area. If the Fitzgerald struck bottom, even briefly, it could have caused damage, resulting in slow leaks to cargo holds or ballast tanks. The ship would then gradually lose buoyancy, without the crew realizing how serious it was. Ooh, hey, didn't mean to interrupt your viewing experience. I just have a couple of quick shout outs I wanted to give before getting back to the Edmund Fitzgerald. Over here, we've got a list. John, Richard, Sue, Mike, Belle, Tater, Craig, Rachel, Rebel, and Jack P. were all generous to tip our trip jar, which allows us to get out and film some really awesome places and share these great stories. Now, back to the Fitz. If you didn't know, there's been a new structural damage theory that's been put out recently. Captain Darrell Walton, whose uncle Ralph G. Walton went down with the Fitz, claims that in 1958, when the Fitzgerald was first launched, it suffered some damage that was never properly repaired. It is Captain Walton's belief that this unresolved damage, along with the storm damage and impossible grounding of the ship, resulted in perfect conditions for catastrophic failure, leading to the sinking of the Fitz.
The wreck shows the ship broke into two very large pieces. The bow section plunged into the lake bed at a steep angle. The stern section landed upside down 170 feet away.
This suggests that the hull broke apart as the Fitzgerald sank, evidence of structural failure under extreme stress. I realize so far we haven't covered any theories that may be that bizarre or strange, other than perhaps the Three Sisters theory. But when you have 29 men vanish, seemingly without a trace, imaginations run wild. Thus, you end up with theories like these. Yes, seriously. Believe it or not, in the late 70s, tabloids suggested the Fitzgerald was actually abducted by a UFO. The evidence? No distress call, sudden disappearances from radar, and the fact that Lake Superior has had other mysterious disappearances. Then there's the government cover-up theory. Some conspiracy theorists claim the Fitzgerald was carrying top secret military cargo, possibly nuclear materials or weapons, and the government covered up the real cause of the sinking. Ancient curse. Old sailors talked about the Fitzgerald being cursed from the moment she was launched. During construction, a worker tragically passed away, and during her christening, the champagne bottle didn't break on the first swing. There were even some crew members who reported strange occurrences while aboard the ship. Were these instances caused by the supernatural, or just superstitions and tragic coincidences? You know what would be even more bizarre? If the Edmund Fitzgerald had been cursed by some evil force, and then because of that curse, a UFO came and abducted the men off the ship, and then the government covered it all up. Sounds ludicrous, right? Aliens, UFOs, government cover-up, ancient curse. I'm kind of sensing a theme here. Which, by the way, if this is the type of thing that you're into, you'll definitely want to check out the playlist I've put together of our other episodes where we dive into more of these things. As far as the Edmund Fitzgerald goes, there was no evidence to suggest whatsoever that the sinking had anything to do with UFOs or aliens. And I suspect that the reason that the tabloids came out with that fanatical story has a lot to do with the fact that they never recovered any of the remains of the crew members. It is my understanding that it would have been a costly endeavor to do so, and it was also the wishes or the desires of the families that the wreckage remain undisturbed. They viewed it as you would be basically digging up the graves of their family members, and they didn't want that. As far as this whole government cover-up theory, people point to how quickly the Coast Guard conducted and closed the investigation, and then the fact that they sealed the records. Declassified documents show, however, that what was on board the ship was actually what we've been told all along, the iron ore pellets. So what really sank the Edmund Fitzgerald? It is possible we will never know the truth. The truth is, people want a mystery. Sometimes it's just not enough to believe that a ship just sank in a storm. Yet, in doing so, we ignore the reality that nature's raw power, combined with human vulnerability, results in man's mortality.
What I don't think many people realize is just how ferocious storms on the Great Lakes can be. Even though the waters today are fairly calm, it's not unheard of for storms to whip up ferociously, seemingly out of nowhere.
Never underestimate the power of nature, especially here on the Great Lakes. On that fateful night, vessels that were below the Soo Locks reported wind gusts as high as 96 miles per hour. With the exception of the more bizarre theories out there, I think we can all agree that the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald was the result of a number of factors lining up perfectly. Experts in the industry would call that the Swiss cheese effect, which is when all the holes or factors like equipment failures, weather, human performance, errors, etc., all line up perfectly to give you the one event.
The sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald is certainly a tragedy and will likely go down in history as the worst shipwreck here on Lake Superior. To date, there has never been another sinking of a ship as large as the Edmund Fitzgerald. And in fact, the Edmund Fitzgerald is often referred to as the Titanic of the Great Lakes.
Regardless, though, of how you slice it, how you analyze it, how many more dives you take down to the wreck, the ending never changes. 29 men lost their lives that night. May they rest in peace. Thanks for joining me today, sightseers. If you found this fascinating, make sure you boop that like button and subscribe for more forgotten history from America's backroads. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring.